Good afternoon and welcome to Somos 2022 here on the island of Puerto Rico. We are so happy and delighted to bring coffee and conversation to our friends in New York and those watching us on the web, on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook Lives, and those who are who are joining us on the Zoom chat. Just a couple of housekeeping details. We're here to welcome the Honorable Marjorie Velazquez, Chair of the New York City Council Committee on Consumer Affairs and Worker Protection. We will also have a facilitated chat box in the Zoom chat, so please feel free to put any of your questions into the box and we'll get through them throughout the discussion today. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome the President of the Bronx Chamber of Commerce, Lisa Soren. Lisa, welcome today.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you, Councilwoman Velazquez, for being here. These coffee and conversations have been something that have been super important for our members, for the general audience, because we get to know you on a much more personal note. We get to get your ideas as to what's happening. The chamber loves it. So I'm going to start with like a fun question, right? We'll start with the fact that you are also the chair of one of the strongest committees, which is the Consumer Affairs and Workers Protection Committee. So everybody looks to you for a lot of questions, a lot of answers. Exactly. But let's start with something fun. We're here in Puerto Rico. There's a lot of movers and shakers, elected officials. We've been having some really interesting conversations with everything going on in Puerto Rico and New York. Tell me, what do you take out of this, the purpose?
Well, Puerto Rico is like the big borough of New York City, right?
Nicely put.
And so it has always been a way for folks to come here to the island and hear and see how Puerto Rico handles various topics, right? Either legislatively, financially as well, and really have a frank and open conversation in a way that it just is a calmer way. That's what I found here, right? Certainly yesterday we had the opportunity, a couple of us, through Councilmember Salamanca, who I know had done one of these as well.
Yes.
So we went, met up with the mayor of San Juan, seeing how they're handling not only COVID recovery, certainly Fiona recovery, because when Councilmember Salamanca, myself, mayor, came in October to see the devastation. We heard about what they needed, and certainly we've been working towards it and see what that progress has been like, and also see how they actually have how they pass the laws here, how they manage what their budget's like, where their budget priorities are, and how we do it differently, right? And so it's having that conversation. It's very open, fluid. It also gives you a different perspective on leadership and how to govern, right? And that was yesterday. Today, this morning, I had the ability, thanks in large part to not only the speaker, but certainly council members Alexa Alves and Bon. We went and had a great conversation and talked about gender-based violence, how Puerto Rico deals with it, and how we in our laws in New York City can inspire them to incorporate some of those same bills and legislation here, but certainly how can we work together to provide access to not only information, but certainly resources to make sure that we're addressing some of the key issues that affects both our communities, right? Gender-based violence really affects us in New York City, and there's a lot of information that was shared, and we're going to take that forward and keep on coming back to the group and work together, right? We want to make sure that we're empowering and uplifting. It's a group effort, and certainly having allies in Puerto Rico is pretty powerful. And there's this commitment where we showed up, right? This is the beauty of having 31 women council members, a majority in the city council, and that strength that we bring as women to empower others. It's just incredible.
And this is right. So a lot of people talk about Somos, but this is exactly what it's about, right? It's exchanging of ideas. Yesterday we had a business forum. We were talking about the small businesses, and so it is the hope that that Puerto Rico takes some of that information, but we can help them apply it, right? So
and that's opening those doors to a lot of the small businesses on the island, right? What better way to connect them to the larger corporations in the city, right? And exposing them to a broader audience, and certainly to different avenues that they probably didn't even consider.
Correct, which is wonderful. So Yeah, we can talk, we should do a segment just not so one minute. So that people really understand, yes, we're doing it in the beauty of Puerto Rico, but there's so many reasons behind it. But we are here for New York.
That's right. That's why you represent part of the Bronx, right?
Yeah, it's the largest
Yeah, right.
district in the Bronx.
Right,
Yeah.
and one of the largest in New York City that
Yes.
has, very, that in New York represents that particular also care of the committee on consumer affairs and protection. You just recently, introduced some legislation with a very good pro small business legislation with, Intro 13.
Yes, with Holden.
Yes,
Yes.
please.
So, first of all, this is the beauty of like being out of boroughs, right? It's working together in a different capacity, and for us, we're lucky in that we can have conversations and work together. And this was it. This is so many small businesses came up to us and said, we want the ability to be competitive, and oftentimes red tape, bureaucracy stops that. And
Really?
That's got a lot of this red tape. Since the beginning of the year, we've seen him go back and into the books, and he definitely to his team. They work to remove stuff, work with agencies, collaborate. Just last week, the whole Get Clean New York City, which is huge, right? After we faced what we faced the last couple of years, and when we're talking about public safety, comes hand in hand with quality of life, and that's a priority, right? Cleaner streets, make it easier for our communities, and it's that dedication to take that initiative, and and I love Commissioner Fish, so
Yeah.
because when I first met her, literally the day after she first started, she came to the district.
Mhm.
We went down across the avenue, swept away, like she's hands-on. And during that, we had great conversations, and she's like, I just want to be clean. And it's something so simple, right? And going back to small businesses, right? And that red tape, sometimes just we have to let things be more simple and remove complications, because that's true progress. And it's okay. We make mistakes. Go back into the laws. Make sure that you're going through and empowering those that need it to be competitive. And that's what 813 does.
I think a lot of people like that. That's probably helpful for a lot of people who are watching today. Is that legislation is organic. It changes with the times. So laws that were put in the 1960s need to be evaluated and assessed. If they're not harming public safety or if they're really antiquated, they need to be
I
revised.
think 813 really started differently, right? Because it was all about COVID in the beginning, and then we kind of lost the purpose of the support of small business. So can you tell them like what this intro is really going to mean for the small businesses who need the help for marketing?
So I think taking a step back, right, and explaining when we're looking at apps like Grubhub, right?
Right.
So specifically Grubhub, how do they focus on empowering small businesses? I'm a small business. I just opened up a restaurant. I'm new to the game, and I want to be on the same level as one of the bigger corporate chains. But right now, I'm capped, and I can't pay that little extra. But I could pay extra if it was a paper. If I needed to put an ad on a paper, I could pay extra on other marketing. Yeah, but now I can't do it on something that I'm actually using day to day that folks use so often. Let's take a step back and see how can we empower it and just giving that opportunity. We're not saying that I'm stopping anyone from being competitive. It's actually removing that cap has been helpful because of the fact that we're now allowing folks to pay a little extra if they want.
If they want, and that's a key phrase, right? If they
And
want
it's
to.
just to be competitive. And that's what we need to focus on. It's just allowing folks to be as competitive as possible.
That's right. That particular law falls on so many pieces of legislation that have passed and a lot of media that remember the 14.5. But it's really good legislation. What are your thoughts on how do we keep this kind of positive momentum forward? What are some, piece of legislation that you're excited about moving forward?
Well, I think going back to that point, key point, we heard $14 million. And what did they use that for? Employment, jobs. And that's what's important for us, right? Sustainability of our communities it comes down to what jobs our families are getting. And a job in sanitation is a livable wage job, right? And so when we're talking about building up families, this is it, right? And so for us, and certainly for the administration, it is just how do we bring back that money to our communities? Because guess what? More money for our communities means better housing, better, like it just, that's everything. And that local economy keeps on circling.
And like, I think the local economy job component of us coming out of COVID.
Yes.
Like there are certain things that came up from COVID, using our streets better, giving restaurants flexibility in streets and the whole open dining program that came out of there. And some people love it, some people hate it, but we just want to remind everybody that program is born out of the crisis.
It was an emergency program, right? And it still exists as an emergency program. What we're doing with the legislation right now, it's making sure that when we're talking about making it permanent, that we're involving as many folks from different viewpoints to understand what's their biggest concerns. And so we heard at the beginning of the year, remember January, it was like the first hearing out of the new council, and me and council member Kevin Bradley were there for like almost like 10 hours, which was wild. Thankfully with Zoom, and so like I had all my soda cans all lined up, but it allowed us to hear from folks. And what we did is took that information and then we followed up enforcement, because that's where we worked with DOT and said, hey, what's working? This seems to be the biggest complaint so far. How can we address this? And that's why during spring, summer, the mayor had announced the initiative to remove the sheds, especially the ones that were in critical shape, right? And definitely that is what had hurt a lot of the open dining that folks had seen, because that's what they saw as an eyesore, as a problem. And we heard that and we took action. And so what we're doing now with this legislation is making sure that as we look forward, standardizing, simplifying the licensing, and making sure that the experience, right, from different agencies are shared and how we can build each other up.
So I know there is discussion.
There are some things
that and I forget the word, so those who know me understand that I just tend to jump in, but so there's conversations about where to move the outdoor dining under the agency. And so we've heard from our members, we at the Bronx work extremely closely with all the other 4 chamber presidents, and DOT was the lead agency, has the ability to understand the regulations of what should go on the sidewalk, the spaces on the sidewalk. And there's been conversation about moving it into consumer affairs. And so I will say that on behalf of the chamber and the businesses we represent, we think that's a horrible idea. And why? Not because we don't think that workers, the consumer affairs department cannot do it, but we're talking right now a program that overall was so successful that brought our businesses, and there were numbers that I looked at that prior to COVID being the outdoor dining and all of that, the Bronx had something like 3 or 4% of outdoor dining, right? And you had all these other boroughs with great outdoor dining. So we got to experience it as a borough and we love it. Yes, there's many things to change like anything else, but I think the Department of Transportation has the budget, has the individuals, the permitting understanding. And if we're talking long-term, I think that it's important before we go into, dare I say, something like fines or violations of what you're not doing, of what you're doing wrong. Let's set the standard, to your exact point. Let's set the standards with the experts, and then let's talk about what agencies can maintain it for the communities as a whole. And knocking down those sheds, we had a team of our outreach go out and help some of the restaurants, like bang those things to the floor. Because unfortunately, and I need not tell you, you have a lot of restaurants in your district. You have restaurants that really are just putting it up for storage, right? And I don't blame the residential community to come to you and say, do something about it. But I think we're all strongly in favor of keeping it in the Department of Transportation. And I'm going to speak from my other chambers without that unknowing, but we all are in favor of saying, let DOT finish the project, let DOT standardize this, let DOT understand and get the residents and the restaurants permitted the correct way. And then we can talk long-term, right? Then we have council members like yourself and Riley and our local, that we can say, okay, what can we change after we've made it permanent? We've made it safe. We've made it the same across the board, right? No matter what we're all hearing. So I hope I'm not stepping on toes here, but I think we're really accurate about that.
Like that. Yeah, it's not just over time. They'll give development or a report that accompanies it. So yes, a street may lose 8 parking spaces, but how many millions of dollars that can generate off of that program? I think that's a really important thing. I'm so grateful.
I'm not a smart man. Actually, make a recommendation, you know.
I don't know, maybe. I don't know. But no, it's like a great, like, and that's council. But I think it's really strengthened the program, and I think at this point, putting it with DOT also strengthens our opportunity to well funded support. Please give me as much as we do love them, and please, Commissioner, don't come for us. Yeah, we do. I think DOT is more accustomed for applying for larger federal grants and support, just like this group that so much money from the federal government. It's going to be a lasting, long-term impact.
I mean, I think going back to the point originally, when we're talking about legislation and listening to folks, literally, I had the information printed out on me when I was at your bar.
Debate watch.
Yes. Let's really go. Yeah, you know, it's like what 10 o'clock at night, and we're going through it and discussing it. And I have to say, back to DOT's point, literally after you made that comment, I called them up and we worked through it till midnight, just to include that piece, right? So like and I'm not saying anything about any other agency. It's just that literally that was what their capacity was to do that, and getting them on board with that was huge, because our communities deserve that. And what we're also going to use that information is to show how much the outer boroughs benefiting through this. We're talking about 100,000 jobs.
We're still in the Bronx. We need people jobs. I think what the rate around 2% or something last 5 months. You need the job in restaurants, bars, nightclubs. Like those are solid job generators for a lot of our districts. And they're also slowly becoming really well paid. There's a few businesses over where their servers are making $75,000, $90,000 a year.
Are they hiring? Because I mean,
we can all put our applications. Yes, I think that's folks, small businesses. There's so many jobs in the city. Council, we're seeing kind of a shift of like, how can we help small businesses?
and I think another, right, and to your exact point, the mayor has really put a total priority on small business, and they know that. So having these type of conversations becomes so much easier because we have the support of the higher ups, as they say, right? And then we have voices like yourself that are taking it to the next level. So I think it's phenomenal. I'm sorry, you had some other questions.
Yeah, no. So it's often come with prepared questions about everything on the side, but it's so rare that we actually get a conversation where we're actually in person.
I know, really.
And we have like a talk show, like
We need an airport.
thanks for being the host. Yeah. So we're a donor on the Chamber of Inspectors. But what are some things that are exciting to about the Bronx, your district, and, I think a very forward-moving New York City. What are things that are exciting that you look forward to in the spring?
There's a lot, right? We were talking about an opportunity to see our small businesses thrive, right? And for us, it was just the old white stone cinema will now be an Amazon warehouse.
Correct.
And having that conversation with Amazon, and making sure that there is a partnership, right? There is a way that these mega businesses can be held accountable, right? And it's working with our small businesses, right? So it's reminding them, hey, you're large, that's great. So when you have like a small corporate party in there, these are small restaurants, right? Like here's the list.
Right.
Like if you want to highlight a small business in the district every month, these are like some of our small businesses, right? It's expanding the base for our communities and delivering in a holistic way, right? There is a way to work on both ends, but it's having tough conversations, and Lord knows I can have those tough conversations.
They are, right? We're tough tough conversations have a lot better legislation. People run their business. At least I know Amazon had like an entrepreneur program where they essentially send the entrepreneurs to like an Amazon Academy. They go on Amazon. Like all of those things are really positive. The community think it's a little nervous about it. We sort of think that about truck drivers.
It's fine. It's fine. We can talk about that, right? But we can also talk about what a relationship looks like. We could also define that, and it's on us.
Exactly.
And we cannot remove that from the equation. And having them understand that from the beginning, right? It's just you're not being anything but authentic. It's like, welcome to the Bronx. This is how we work. This is how we operate, and our small businesses need this. And just reminding them, and they've understood it.
And I think with Amazon, we've been very honest with them if they redevelop warehouse, because they are investing a good deal of money.
Which is needed, considering the outlets.
But they, right, you give it a very common style. But they've also listened to feedback on, so now there's trucks. They've built it out with that for drone technology, which is something that I think our legislation can catch up to. But like, I think that they're taking it seriously, and having that partnership is super important. Because we're not just looking for next year, we're looking for the long term.
Correct. And sometimes, in this world, right, we look at short-term impacts because it's always what's the next thing, and it's taking that step back and saying, wait, okay, I know what you're trying to do, but this is what my community needs, and how to navigate this into better outcome.
Right. And that's always been my, right? Sometimes we get hit with things we may not like. When Amazon was trying to do things, and there was all this fighting back and forth. But then they're in the Bronx and they're giving back because they're hearing from the community. Our representatives are sitting with them. They want to train and work with our small business, which is something the chamber's been working really hard to put the products of our own small businesses on their sites, right? That's huge, because the big conversation during COVID was e-commerce, they're destroying small business. But in reality, there's great opportunities for our small businesses to be part of. DoorDash, we were talking about third party. DoorDash is putting these markets, quick delivery, but what they're also doing is making sure that the bodegas that surround them, it's their products going in, and that's the question, right? And so, but that doesn't happen with saying, oh, we don't want you. It's okay, you're coming in, and we have to embrace new business. But I think it's a give or take, and what's going to happen in the future. To your point, the new generation, and I'll throw you in there. Immediate gratification, but we're at a point where the Bronx highlight is in the Bronx for business, the economic development, as we're accepting it, as all this legislation, and you're being bombarded as are all electeds, the conversation is, what does it mean while we're accepting it now, long term? And so we can have and create that narrative long term if conversations continue, right? Just like no is no longer a conversation. We're too sophisticated. We're growing by leaps and bounds, and we're going to embrace it because we always knew the Bronx was a gem. There was never any doubt about it. Exactly. You can't make it work for us.
That you could do and say, but how far can that take you and the community, right? And I would rather not have like that quick media fight and I go back into my community and actually deliver. And in delivering means jobs, jobs, jobs. That's my priority because that is the foundation for our communities, whether it is empowering the local small businesses or even having like workforce development within the district to make sure that we're providing access to different trades and certainly access to better jobs.
100%. I think that's great. Job creation is something that is super important. And like looking at all facets of the workforce. We had one of our board members, Liz, employs about 1,100 people out of her company, and it's like still one of our small. She approaches it like a very kind heart. She does her best to make sure that like her employees are happy employees at the company. And I think it's really important that we look at that, particularly when we take a look at job creation. So in our conversations with Amazon or as we address housing, how do we really map out the step-by-step plans to make sure that our communities evolve holistically with really solid business partners and
I think it's going back to a model where it's understanding what the priorities are, right? So priority one, job, and then going into see how that certainly working with Bronx delegation. I'm not criticizing any prior delegation, but I feel like this Bronx delegation is amazing.
really unified.
No, we're really great.
Like out in America, like no nonsense against agenda. Like for those who are watching, Councilmember Stevens and Councilmember Dinowitz are the delegation chairs. But they're really like they're on it, and like you guys are all actual friends and like each other, which is amazing.
We do. It's fun stuff, and but it's like the work hard, play hard.
That's right.
And we know that we all have this vested interest to making sure that the Bronx is highlighted the way it should, right? For often the Bronx has been out of mind, and we're here to bring it front and center, right? The Bronx is no longer burning, but it's building, and have a fabulous group of council members who are really cool.
And I'm going to add to that to say, for the Bronx Chamber, selfishly or otherwise, it really is about, as we have the dynamic elected officials creating this wonderful place to do business and live and changes, that everything stays in the Bronx, right? When nobody else believed in the Bronx, we were all here struggling to say, leave perception to the side. There's so much more to the Bronx than what hits the front pages, right? We are a family-owned business, micro businesses. We are family-oriented. It's just the Bronx has a small town feel given the opportunity, and so our fight or our strong ask across the city is now that it's our turn and you're all looking to us. You put our people to work. You work our businesses to do your construction projects. You use our businesses to build your business. We do buy Bronx, do Bronx. Everything anybody needs to build a business in our borough is already here. Your services are here, and we're saying to them, use us because we've been riding that wave, and now it's like, yeah.
I think Somos is actually this particular Somos is very Bronx heavy.
Yes, it is.
From the panel discussions to the fellow business owners who are here. I think the chamber also has like 12 board members. who
12
are
or
here.
15 board members here, all doing their working on behalf of the chamber, their businesses.
Distilleries, breweries, restaurant owners. You know, you walk down, I was like, wait, I thought I was on Third Avenue for a minute. You know, but I think that's really indicative of like Bronx is serious.
Right.
Our borough counterparts, except for Brooklyn.
Randy, ignore that. Randy, we're kidding.
But, you know, for the Bronx, you know, I think we're back. All of them. It's just a question of chat. And you know, it's probably a very difficult thing to do in council. The recent, and, you know, we talked to Marco chair, land use, and, you know, just, you know, unpack. Those are really heavy. How do you do that, like, both personally, because it's a lot that weighs on your mind, but then also legislatively, how do you balance?
It is having a strong brain trust, right? Understanding what's at stake, right? And going back to what do you really want out of this, right? Understanding what is that? You know, there's going to be a lot of noise. And it's certainly going back to my inauguration where the mayor came and like, the one thing he said was, don't get distracted by the noise. Focus on what you need to get done. And your work will see itself and will prove itself. And that's something I carried with me. You know, people will always have an opinion. Everyone's entitled to it. What is more important is understanding what's at stake. What does the community really need? And making a decision that is guided by real values and what can you bring back, and understanding what can be asked and what can really be delivered.
I think it's great. I think that they're nice thread that's our Bronx dedication. That we say, you know, you may not say what's popular, but we're saying what's right, and we're saying, you know, and I think that's really important.
We're all set in our ways, and it goes back to what I was saying about the Bronx just being very familiar and people want the same. But as we're changing, if you join the conversation in that change, your voice will be heard, right? And all these changes in the long run make sense, but come to the table open-minded and understand what I always say, and those who know me, the courageous conversations are not always the easiest, but are extremely necessary. And although sometimes the outcomes are not what you want in the moment, the future will determine. And not all of them are right, and not all of them are wrong, but we're in such a great direction that if changes are going to happen now with all the noise, we're in the driving. So drivers.
That's, you know, and having partners, right? You know, certainly my brain trust is part of it, but literally having a relationship with the mayor, with the speaker, is also very positive thing, right? And going back to the Bronx delegation, right? You have Salamanca, land use chair, Kevin Riley, zoning chair, Penina, housing chair, right? So like,
And
maybe
yourself.
don't bring up. Yeah, it's that experience, right? That folks have. I mean, Salamanca has been there for a while now, choosing to see and gone through various different zonings, and so understanding and hearing his perspective is key too.
Right, I think that's right. Change does happen. I think what's important that we realize collectively as borough is that, you know, a change in Riverdale ripples the rest of Bronx, change in sound, the change in mocking, you know, it's having that broader out understand about how can higher Bronx thrive, and we have something to do with higher elevation. Leads me to another question, Chava. We know it's not in your district, but it's actually a really exciting borough project, the Kingsbridge Farmer, and the potential for that. Do you have any thoughts on like what you're excited about, what you hope is going to be included? We know it's going to be massive, like it's the largest farmer in the world, right? Yeah. Yeah.
I just love that it's back in to the conversation, right? And that folks have an opportunity, with, and look, shout out to Vanina, I love her, and her energy, right? And what she's gonna bring to the table. And this was her dream, right? When she was running, this is what she spoke about, and seeing this come to light, seeing the opportunity of growth and what can it be, right? I think the opportunities are endless, but obviously we're all gonna have to settle on something.
Right.
And here we go again.
It's like, you know, we're gonna that's your problem.
Right. But it's the fact that I know she's already taking leadership, but more important that this is gonna continue, we're gonna find something together. And I'm excited because like,
The optics is have been things that the Bronx has asked for in a lot of these large venues, discussions, like things are finally in at least 3 languages. You know, and we're not just talking about like informational packs, but like the signage to give to the event. You have translators, like things that, you know, we've really been pushing for years, and now they're coming to fruition in what could be the largest street development project that city has seen.
right, I'm excited. And like, but going to that point, it's seeing people, hearing people in their native language. It's also giving them an opportunity to have a voice in their native language that we can all work together. Right, going back to that beautiful mosaic that Mayor Jenkins always talked about, right? It's recognizing and seeing the beauty and uplifting our community through that.
There are a lot of projects that we have to do that will have a transformation effect on our road. We're so happy to be part and like discussion that we're pushing the council. So, please, do you have a final question?
What are we looking at going forward? I know this session coming towards December, usually there's all this rush of things that may have been on the table that are looking forward to. Your between land use, housing, and your committee are probably one of the most busiest right now, especially with all the changes. You know, I'll add a piece to that to guide the conversation, but, and I go back to what Councilwoman Julie Menon did with the putting everything in the one-stop shop, right? All of that helps on the work end, on the business end, and on your end, how do you see, like, what do you see happening in the next few months?
So I will let folks know next Thursday, the council member Sean Bray are actually gonna have a hearing on student debt.
Oh, wow.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, we're being aggressive, right? Yeah, and then also, we're gonna have a hearing on the so-called sticker stuff, where a lot of our small businesses, have all this plastic.
Plastic.
Course, right.
Every utensil, you get like 20 packs of hot mustard.
Right.
Right, exactly. And then you have your drum drawers full of them.
It all translates to our landfill,
Right.
and then this is a broader issue on our environment. And so it's taking the lead, making it pass into law, and letting small businesses, you know, save a lot of money too.
Okay.
So
Those trips to Jetro, they're
yes,
expensive.
they're
They
expensive,
are.
right? So we can allow small businesses an opportunity to save money, right? Going back to the simple things, right? Allowing and empowering is what we did, and that's part of it. And so we're excited about that. That's part of our bill that we want to pass this year. So that's one of them, and that's where finding that balance, right? We're like looking at the climate change in our district, impacts it has in our community, and addressing it in many ways, right? If infrastructure changes, working hand in hand with DEP, identifying issues, especially different catch bases. I've worked a lot with actually Civil Beach on that. And even Morris Park for folks that remember that whole sinkhole situation, working to identify which pipes are affected by that specific method that was used, right? So briefly for folks, back in 1916, the borough president at that time chose a different method to construct these pipes. And so those are the ones that have been creating the sinkhole. So when we identify those now, we can retrofit it, if you will, to protect it, and so we don't have sinkholes. So that's
really good, particularly for the folks at Orange Park. That's
yes,
the thing.
that was
Super
huge.
expensive,
And it's
right?
huge, but it's also the flooding that happens. So it's how we care of folks in very different ways and just addressing climate change, right? More water in our streets and, so taking a different path and making sure that we're addressing things in every single space that we can.
I think that's important. Really appreciate about this administration also. Council. That things are not being done. Right? Like, Amazon. What's on either side? There's also a more access from Bruckner and things like that to reduce neighborhood traffic. That's also being done holistic. Drone technology. I think so. I think it's really important that particularly folks online see that things are no longer being done in the back. Right? There's more collaboration among cities. Right? There's transparency, but also the private sector also this conversation. So instead of just building a 500,000 square factory, you're pulling in the public sector saying, okay, well, how do we make this a win for everybody? That's a real testament to your contact council. You're welcome. You don't have compliments a lot, so It's true. But we always close out these sessions by having a forward thinking. So in terms of what are you most hopeful about for Bronx? And I know this wasn't given to you in advance, so this is like a real box.
So long. That's why with that path, right? And now given the opportunity to shine.
Okay. Well, first I want to thank you, because I know even though we're here in Puerto Rico, the agendas are full. The agendas are full.
That's a good point. Folks watching, our days start at like 7 a.m.
Yeah.
It's legislative breakfast and don't end until like 2 o'clock in the morning. And
Yeah.
not 2 o'clock in the morning cocktail. It's actually like work that's happening.
So I appreciate you being here. I appreciate the fact that we put this together because Mike, you as our legislative chair, have made this a huge priority for us. This has been an opportunity to really have a real conversation with a friend, with someone who represents, and actually you are my councilwoman on the other side of my chamber hat. We want to keep these conversations going. It really is about the transparency, the chamber's vision and mission to really, I look at the mayor's agenda for business, and we want to make the Bronx the shining star of that mission for him and for this administration and our council, because I will say we have some powerhouses in the Bronx for our representatives. I'm thrilled. And I'm not just saying that because you're here. I've had the opportunity to literally walk the corridors of all our council, and they are just all Bronx. So, thank you. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you for being so honest with us, with our audience. And the chamber, we're here about developing our businesses, the conversation, whether it be in Puerto Rico. Haven't had a chance to enjoy the sun yet, but I will. Or in New York, right? At the end of the day, it's all about the Bronx. And so thank you from the bottom of our hearts for all you do. You're absolutely.
So Councilmember, thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate it. And for folks that are viewing online, this will be available on the Chamber YouTube page, which is the New Bronx Chamber. It's up there, or you can find us on social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn. And tune in next week. We will have Councilmember Eric Dinowitz, the chair of the Committee on Higher Education, joining us, talking about a little bit of what's going on in Riverdale and the Kingsbridge areas of the Bronx. And we look forward to catching you all the time with coffee and conversation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love this format because we're all actually together. So stay tuned. Be sure to follow the Chamber of Commerce online by using @ the new BXCC. So thanks so much, and we look forward to seeing you soon.